Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. Out here in the woods, I wanted silence, solitude, peace. What I got was a war, not with wild animals, but with something far more relentless. A homeowners association determined to take what wasn't theirs. They came with smiles, then threats, but they knocked on the wrong damn door. The first thing I saw that morning, before the coffee, before the sunrise really cracked through the trees, was movement by the front gate. At first, I thought it might be deer again, or one of the wild turkeys that like to test the limits of my patience and my garden fencing. But no, this wasn't wildlife. These were bipeds, and they weren't moving much at all. I stood in my kitchen, shirtless, holding a mug in one hand and the curtain in the other, blinking at the trio parked just outside my property line. A woman in a pastel blazer, blonde, uptight, the Karen prototype if I'd ever seen one, and two men flanking her like underqualified bodyguards. All of them were holding tablets or clipboards. They weren't knocking. They weren't calling out. They were just waiting. I squinted at them from behind the window pane. They were standing dead still, like they were trying to project authority through posture alone. I let the curtain fall and turned to flip the coffee machine on. I didn't know what the hell they wanted, but I had a suspicion. Winding Creek HOA had been sniffing around for months, sending me letters I didn't ask for, suggesting I should voluntarily submit my property for architectural review, even though my land wasn't within their jurisdiction. 6 acres. That's what I bought. 6 quiet, forest-backed, sweat-earned acres just outside the clustered nonsense of the HOA development. My name's Robert Nash. I'm 44. Engineer by trade, mountain man by choice. And as far as I was concerned, whatever rules Karen and company were trying to wave around didn't reach this far up the ridge, legally, geographically, spiritually, but apparently no one gave them the memo. I stepped into the shower, trying to ignore the unwanted audience at the gate. The water was hot, but my mood simmered hotter. I kept thinking they'd take the hint and go back to wherever they came from. Instead, when I finished, dressed, and came back with coffee in hand, they were still there. Now one of them was sitting on the hood of their SUV like they were tailgating a stakeout. 20 minutes passed, then 30. They didn't move. They didn't knock. They didn't leave. They just stared at the house, my house, like a problem they were waiting for permission to solve. I finally walked out onto the porch. The boards creaked under my boots. The wind stirred the pines, but nothing from the trio. They stood there like they were waiting for me to make the first move. "Can I help you with something?" I called out, my voice just loud enough to carry over the gravel drive. The woman in the blazer stepped forward. Her smile was practiced, stretched across her face like a retail return policy. "Good morning, Mr. Nash. I'm Karen Landry, Vice President of the Winding Creek Homeowners Association. We were hoping to speak with you informally, just a friendly conversation, neighbor to neighbor." "Funny," I said. "Most friendly conversations start with a knock." She gave a tight laugh. "We didn't want to intrude, but we did notice that your property is visible from certain angles of the Winding Creek community, and we've received some concerns about visual impact, about architectural cohesion. My house is 100 yards outside your jurisdiction," I replied, "and I have a notarized land survey to prove it." "Yes, well, boundaries are sometimes open to interpretation, and our community has an interest in maintaining a unified aesthetic. We were hoping you might consider enrolling your property in our compliance program voluntarily." I took a long sip of my coffee. "No." Karen's expression didn't shift, but one of the clipboard guys glanced down like he was checking a checklist and just marked non-compliant. "We're simply offering guidance," she said. "Your guidance stood outside my home for over an hour." "That's not guidance. That's intimidation with a Wi-Fi signal." Karen blinked. "We didn't want to bring legalities into this. We hoped for something more cooperative." "Let me make it clear," I said. "I'm not part of your HOA. I never signed into it. My property isn't included in your covenants. I have 6 acres registered under an independent deed with its own servitude lines. Whatever you're trying to do here, drop it." One of the clipboard guys cleared his throat. "You do realize, sir, that visual noncompliance can affect neighboring property values." I cut him off with a look. "You're standing on a public road trying to dictate how I use private land. That's not your right. And if you don't leave now, I'm going to assume you're trespassing with intent to harass." They stared at me in silence. Karen's face tightened into a smile so thin it looked stapled on. "We'll return with documentation," she said softly. I gave a short nod. And I'll be ready. I turned and walked back inside, locked the door, put down my mug, checked the battery on my security cameras. They were still standing there when I walked into my office and clicked on the live feed, staring, waiting. But now, I had time on my side, and a guest due to arrive any minute. What they didn't know was that this Saturday, I wasn't alone. I was still watching them from the window when the unmistakable sound of tires crunching gravel drew my attention to the main drive. A dark blue Ford Explorer rolled up slowly, engine humming low and steady, sunlight glinting off the windshield. The second I saw it, I smiled. Right on time, Nate Bancroft didn't wait for an invitation. The door popped open and he stepped out like he never left active duty. Broad frame, short hair, black tactical pants, and, unfortunately for the three trespassers, his full agency windbreaker with the big yellow FBI letters across the back. Badge clipped to his belt, Glock holstered, no-nonsense expression already locked in place. I opened the front door and leaned against the frame. "Morning," I called. "You're about to walk into something fun." Nate's boots crunched as he approached the gate. He hadn't seen the HOA folks yet. I watched his head tilt just slightly as he noticed the three figures still lingering near the fence, now nervously huddled by their SUV. Karen's shoulders went stiff the moment she saw the letters on his jacket. "Robert," Nate said loud enough for them to hear. "You got uninvited guests?" "About 2 hours uninvited," I replied. "They've been standing here like a Jehovah's Witness SWAT team." Karen visibly bristled. One of the clipboard guys took a half step back, and the other instinctively pulled out his phone like he wanted to look busy. Nate turned fully toward them, voice low but clear. "Federal Agent Nate Bancroft. I'm currently off duty, but I still don't take kindly to people showing up at private residences unannounced. What's your business here?" Karen tried to recover quickly. Her face flickered through a few expressions: confusion, superiority, calculation, before settling on the old reliable customer service smile. "We're from the Winding Creek Homeowners Association," she said, adopting a falsely warm tone. "We were just hoping to speak with Mr. Nash about his property's visual compliance with community." Nate held up a hand. "Is this property part of your HOA?" She hesitated. "Technically, no." "Then you have no business being here." Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. One of the clipboard clowns tried to jump in. "We're just volunteers. This isn't official action." Nate stepped closer. "You've been parked on the edge of private land for over 90 minutes. You failed to make contact through any formal channel. You didn't leave when asked. And now you're trying to spin this as a friendly visit?" Karen glanced at the SUV like she was considering a full tactical retreat. "This is all just a misunderstanding," she said quickly. "We were going to leave." Nate pulled out his phone and, without a word, activated the body cam clipped to his collar. A soft beep. A red light blinked. "Let's go ahead and document it anyway," he said, flat. "Just in case this becomes a pattern." Her eyes narrowed, and I could practically hear her trying to calculate how deep they were already in. "There's no need for escalation," she said. "We'll be leaving now." "Before you do," Nate said, pointing at their car, "you might want to address the fact that you've blocked a marked fire access route. That's a code violation in this county. Minimum $200 fine. I suggest you move your vehicle before someone else gets involved." Karen looked like she'd bitten through a lemon. The man nearest to the SUV stumbled forward, fumbling his keys. I watched with a certain grim satisfaction as they clumsily got into the car, their posture stiff, their silence absolute. The engine turned over, gravel kicked, and just like that, they were gone. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Nate turned back toward me, his expression unreadable but vaguely amused. "Well," I said, lifting my coffee mug, "that escalated perfectly." Nate smirked and made his way up the steps. "Want to tell me how long this has been going on?" "Started with letters," I said. "Got real weird around Christmas. That was their third visit. First one where they waited 2 damn hours." "Let's get inside," he said. "And while you're at it, bring me all those letters." As we stepped into the house, I could already feel the mood shift. This wasn't just an annoying HOA anymore. Nate had seen something in their behavior that made him alert. That meant something was wrong, beyond visual standards, beyond neighborly bickering. He didn't say it outright, but I could tell. This wasn't over. And now it wasn't just my problem. Nate took his coffee black and quiet, seated at my kitchen island with a stack of HOA letters fanned out between us like a bad hand of poker. He didn't say much at first, just sipped, scanned, and occasionally whistled through his teeth at the sheer volume of what I'd received over the last few months. "Some of these are damn close to threats," he muttered, tapping one of the early notices from December. "And this one here straight up implies retroactive compliance. That's coercion territory." "Tell me something I don't know," I said, flipping open the folder I'd labeled Annoyance Archive months ago. They started with warm invitations. Then came the warnings. Then the architectural guidelines. Last week they dropped off something called a Visual Unity Directive on my porch. No postage, no name, just that HOA header. Nate leaned back, lips pressed thin. They're laying groundwork. The slow squeeze. You get enough people to voluntarily comply, and the next thing you know, a developer shows up with a rezoning proposal and a county map that magically includes your land. I felt something cold settle in my chest. "You're thinking they're building a case to annex me?" "I'm thinking they're idiots," he said, "but ambitious ones. And today was them testing how far they could push without consequence. Then they picked the wrong damn day," I muttered. Nate stood and crossed the room to the window. The tire tracks from their SUV were still fresh in the gravel. "I'm filing a preliminary report," he said. "Even if I'm off duty, I've got enough here to flag the HOA for attempted coercion. Combined with that fire access violation, it's enough to get the county interested." Just then, we heard the low rumble of an engine outside. My heart skipped a beat. I wasn't in the mood for another visit, but the vehicle passed. A local work truck. Still, Nate didn't relax. "Got anything else you haven't shown me?" I hesitated, then pulled a smaller envelope from the drawer beside the fridge. I'd kept this one aside because it had crossed a different line. No HOA header, no official seal. Just a printed photo. My house taken from the trees. A red circle drawn over my roofline and handwritten underneath it. "Too tall for the skyline. This will be corrected." Nate's expression didn't change, but his whole body went still. "When did this arrive?" "Last Tuesday. No return address. Left under my doormat." He pulled out his phone, snapped a photo of it, and carefully slid it into a plastic sleeve from his backpack. "This qualifies as harassment. Possibly criminal mischief, depending on who's behind it." I tried to keep my voice level. I figured it was Karen. "Maybe," he said. "Or someone she's encouraged. Either way, we're past the neighborhood drama phase." He pulled out his own laptop and began typing. Fast. He tapped into a federal contact database, cross-referenced HOA board filings, and opened an incident log with the local sheriff's office under my name for record tracking. Within 10 minutes, the HOA's board structure was up on the screen, Karen Landry as VP, a president named Greg McCaffrey, unknown to me, and a treasurer with a revoked real estate license. Nate's eyes narrowed. "Here's a fun bit," he said, pointing. "Looks like they submitted a community visual preservation amendment to the county planning office 2 months ago." I raised an eyebrow. And it includes parcels they don't technically own. Yours is circled on the proposal map." That was it. I stood up. "We're suing." Nate nodded. "Not yet. First, we trap them." "What do you mean, trap?" "We set the bait. Let them come back. Next time, we record everything. We log their statements. And I notify the DA." I felt a quiet satisfaction start to stir in my ribs. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't just reacting. I had leverage. I had Nate. And I had a damn good reason to finally push back harder than they were ready for. The calm before the storm was over, and the storm was federal. The next morning started deceptively quiet. A layer of fog still clung to the trees, and the chill hadn't yet burned off the air. But there was a crackling current under the surface, and I felt it in my bones. Nate was already up, outside checking the perimeter of my property with his phone in one hand and a thermos in the other. He'd mapped out where my cameras covered, then adjusted their angles to catch the drive, the gate, and the blind spot between the north pines. I stepped outside just as he was marking something in a notebook. "They'll come back," he said, not even glancing up. "Bullies always do, especially when they think they were embarrassed." "I hope they do," I muttered, still half asleep. "It'll save us the trouble of going to them." By 10 a.m., the fog had lifted. We didn't have to wait long. An anonymous envelope appeared in my mailbox, just like before. No stamps, no address, hand-delivered sometime in the last few hours. Inside was a folded sheet of paper with the phrase, "You can't isolate yourself forever. The community sees you." No names, no signatures. Nate photographed it, sealed it in another sleeve. "They're escalating," he said simply. Want to see how deep this goes? He made a few calls, first to a contact in the Asheville FBI field office, then to the local county recorder's office. By noon, we had a bigger picture. The HOA had not only submitted a visual compliance annexation plan to the county, but also included several adjacent properties on the ridge, many of which were outside any previous version of their jurisdiction. Worse, we learned that two families, retirees, both living further down the slope, had sold their homes within the last 6 months after receiving compliance violation warnings and being told they were in default of community expectations. But those homes had never been part of Winding Creek in the first place. Nate leaned back in his chair, lips pursed. This isn't just about you. This is a slow-moving land grab. I clenched my fists. How the hell are they getting away with this? They're not anymore. That same afternoon, we drove down to the local sheriff's department. Nate filed an official incident report with supporting documentation. The letters, the photographs, the footage from the driveway encounter. He flagged it under targeted community harassment. The deputy behind the desk looked startled when Nate pulled out his badge for context. They tried this on a federal agent's friend, he said. They just didn't know it yet. By the time we got back to the house, a surprise was waiting for us. A folded paper had been pinned to one of my pine trees with a rusty nail. Sloppy, fast, and desperate. Nate pulled it down, unfolded it, and handed it to me. Your friend might have a badge, but he won't be here forever. Some things don't go away just because you hide behind fences. We'll be watching. I read it twice. Nate didn't say anything for a moment. Then, that's stalking. He pulled out his phone and called it in. Not to the local guys. This time, to a contact in the Civil Liberties Task Force attached to the Bureau. Within the hour, the agent in charge from the regional office in Raleigh confirmed an inquiry had been opened. What started as a creepy HOA knock turned into a full-blown investigation. But there was one more detail Nate wanted to confirm. He called in a favor from a private investigator he'd worked with back in Atlanta. Someone who could run financial backgrounds fast. The result? Karen Landry, vice president of Winding Creek HOA, had ties to a small management firm that oversaw private property sales, most recently the 2 homes sold after voluntary compliance breakdowns. Kick them hard enough, Nate said, and they sell. Karen's company swoops in and buys low. Cleanse up, flips, rinse, repeat. It wasn't an HOA. It was a racket. By nightfall, I had 3 new motion lights installed, extra batteries for every camera, and a shared cloud server logging every damn frame. And Nate? He wasn't smiling anymore. It was just after dawn when I saw the flashing orange light at the base of my road. At first, I thought it was a county truck, maybe road work or some downed tree cleanup. But when I drove down in Nate's pickup to check, what I found was something else entirely. A white SUV with Winding Creek Neighborhood Patrol magnet stickers slapped on both sides, parked sideways across the bottom of my private access road, not blocking it entirely, just enough to make a point. Inside were 2 guys in neon vests, one pretending to scroll on a tablet, the other watching the tree line like he expected a deer to pull a gun on him. I parked 10 feet away, engine idling. Nate leaned forward in the passenger seat, sunglasses already on. Well, he said, that's new. I killed the engine, got out, and walked right up to the driver's side window. You're on private property, I said, calm but loud. This isn't a public road, and it's not part of Winding Creek. The man in the driver's seat, balding, sunglasses, maybe late 50s, looked up and smirked like a DMV clerk with a personal grudge. This is a courtesy patrol, he said. We're here to document traffic patterns and ensure unauthorized construction isn't disturbing the aesthetic unity of the area. Do you even hear yourself? I asked. You're trespassing. We're in the public interest, he replied smoothly. And you're being monitored. That's when Nate stepped up beside me, flipped out his badge with a practiced flick, and let the air hang for a moment. And now you're under federal observation, he said. Unless you want to start talking about who exactly authorized this fake patrol, I suggest you move your vehicle before this becomes obstruction. The guy's mouth twitched. His partner looked like he might throw up. They backed out, literally, scraping a bit of gravel on the way. Nate filmed the entire thing. When they were gone, we took photos of the tire marks, the patrol stickers, even the clipboard one of them had dropped in the rush. It was empty, except for a single sheet with my address printed in bold at the top. Back at the house, I was still fuming when my phone buzzed. A neighbor, an older woman I'd met once or twice at the local supply store, had forwarded me a screenshot from the Nextdoor app. Winding Creek had started a thread titled, "Difficult Neighbor Threatens Community Balance," complete with a blurry photo of my gate and insinuations that my non-compliant residence was hurting property values and wildlife migration. They were trying to isolate me publicly, smear me, turn me into some kind of outsider enemy. But they'd underestimated one thing. I wasn't the only one they'd done this to. After lunch, Nate and I canvassed, drove to the two properties further down the mountain, the ones that had recently sold. One of them was still empty, but the second had a caretaker on site doing maintenance. He let us in. The house looked wrong. All neutral colors, same fence style as the Winding Creek rules dictated. A freshly laid gravel path in place of the old forest edge. They gutted the place, the caretaker said. New owners bought it cash after the last couple moved out in a hurry. Heard they'd been fined or something. Nate nodded slowly, like pieces were sliding into place. That evening, we hosted a few of the nearby property owners, people who'd been in the area longer than me. One man, Eugene, a retired Army surveyor, told us he'd received an envelope almost identical to mine 6 months ago. It said my tool shed was obstructing the scenic overlook, wanted me to sign a consent form for modification. "Did you?" I asked. Hell no, he said. But next thing I know, the county comes sniffing around about an unpermitted structure. Took me 3 weeks to clear it up. Another woman, widow, quiet, looked like she'd been storing her nerves in a mason jar for months, shared how HOA reps had offered her a cash payment to facilitate a smooth transition if she agreed to sell and remove future conflict with the community plan. Nate recorded everything. By 9 p.m., he had a working theory. Winding Creek HOA had launched a private campaign to intimidate, pressure, or buy out properties near their development. If you didn't sign in, they'd find a way to push you out. If you pushed back, they'd smear you, monitor you, or worse, fabricate violations. And now, for the first time, someone was documenting their entire playbook. "This isn't about grass height or paint colors," Nate said. "It's about control." I stared out the window at the trees beyond the ridge. "They want the whole mountain," I said, and now they'd have to fight for it. 2 days later, things escalated in a way that even Nate hadn't predicted. We were eating a late breakfast, eggs, black coffee, and a grim sense of humor when I got an alert from my motion sensor at the end of the driveway. Not unusual by itself, but when I checked the feed, I froze. A small group of people, 6 or 7, were walking along the edge of my property line with clipboards, cameras, and one even had what looked like a measuring wheel. They weren't in uniforms, but they had matching vests that read, "Winding Creek Property Integrity Team." Integrity my ass. Nate muttered, already grabbing his phone. We didn't confront them directly this time. Nate said no. He wanted to see how far they'd go. We watched the footage from inside. They circled the trees, pointed at my fence posts, and even took photos of my chimney. One woman waved some kind of laminated map at another man, and they started drawing over it. By the time they left, they'd been on my land for 28 minutes. Every second recorded on high-res motion cam, time-stamped, GPS tagged. Nate uploaded everything to a secure drive, then called in a favor. "I've got a friend at the U.S. Attorney's Office in Asheville," he said. "He's been dying to prosecute an overreaching HOA. We might have just found his test case." That afternoon, we prepared a full report, incidents, footage, testimonies from other landowners, and documentation of the fake patrol, and now this unauthorized inspection. Nate sent it with a summary memo under the subject line, "Coordinated private harassment campaign masquerading as civic oversight." We didn't have to wait long. The very next morning, a black SUV with government plates pulled into my driveway. Out stepped a clean-cut man in a dark suit, his ID clipped visibly to his breast pocket. He introduced himself as Assistant U.S. Attorney Marvin Lasky. He shook my hand, then Nate's, and said, "I read your file. We're opening a preliminary inquiry." I never thought I'd hear those words in relation to my own front yard. While Lasky took statements, another vehicle arrived, a white truck from the county inspector's office. Turns out Nate had sent them a separate complaint about unauthorized land surveying. They'd brought a certified cadastral specialist. We walked the perimeter with him. He looked over the fence, the markers, the notches in the trees where the HOA survey team had scratched their own reference points. When we reached the corner where they'd stood with the laminated map, he just sighed. "These aren't even real boundary indicators," he said. Looks like someone drew this with a highlighter and a prayer. He filed an immediate notice of trespass against Winding Creek, with potential charges for unauthorized land assessment. Lasky nodded with satisfaction. It's a start, but we weren't done yet. 2 hours later, as Nate was closing up his laptop, we heard tires on gravel again. Another car at the gate. This time, it was Karen, alone. Wearing sunglasses, hair done up, holding a heavy leather folder against her chest like it was a bulletproof vest. She stood just outside the gate, didn't ring, didn't knock, just waited. I opened the gate, stepped out, made it 3 paces before she lifted her chin and said, "I came to speak off the record." I stopped. That's not how any of this works. She looked past me, noticed Nate standing on the porch with a tablet already recording. Her mouth tightened. "We believe there's been a misunderstanding," she said, voice brittle. The community outreach effort may have gone beyond its original scope, but there was never any malice. I almost laughed. Malice. Karen, you posted my address on a neighborhood watch site and sent patrols to my house. You walked on my land with fake surveyors. She shifted. Some members took initiative. You're the vice president. She didn't answer. Then she tried something new. Flattery. We really believe your home could be a valuable part of the community. If you'd consider working with us, we could offer, she hesitated, adjustments, financial or architectural support to better integrate. I held up a hand. You don't get to bribe your way out of this. Karen's smile vanished completely. She turned, walked briskly to her car, slammed the door, and sped off without another word. Later that night, Nate got a call from his friend at the attorney's office. The U.S. attorney for the district had officially approved escalation of the inquiry to a full investigation. We were no longer just fighting HOA harassment. Now it was federal. The mood around the house shifted after the federal inquiry began. It wasn't fear exactly, but something heavier, more alert. Nate and I both knew what was coming. HOAs like Winding Creek don't just give up. They hide, then push harder in other ways. 3 days later, the retaliation started. At exactly 7:35 in the morning, I received a certified letter from a courier wearing a cheap security uniform. The letter wasn't from the HOA. It was from Winding Creek Community Architectural Oversight. Same people, different mask. Inside was a glossy, threatening document listing a dozen alleged non-compliance violations on my property. Roof color, mailbox style, gravel path design, chimney height, even the shade of mulch. I nearly choked on my coffee. None of it made sense. I wasn't in their jurisdiction, but the wording was slick, full of phrases like suggested participation, mandatory compliance review pending, and failure to engage may result in escalation per civic code. Nate skimmed it, raised one eyebrow, and said, "They're trying to bait you into responding. Don't bite." Instead, we handed the whole package off to Assistant U.S. Attorney Lasky. That same afternoon, Nate got a ping from a legal database. Winding Creek had filed a civil injunction request in district court, seeking to declare my property architecturally disruptive to neighborhood unity. The gall. It didn't stop there. Over the next 48 hours, a Facebook page appeared called Clean Up Winding Creek, featuring blurry photos of my house and driveway, with captions like dangerous structure and why won't he cooperate? Flyers showed up on nearby mailboxes offering a community initiative to reclaim aesthetic control from outsiders. One night, someone scattered broken landscaping bricks across my driveway, spelling out, "Move." It was harassment in 1,000 cowardly cuts. We documented everything, cameras, logs, screenshots. Nate even pulled some favors to subpoena the HOA's recent email threads. What we found shocked even him. Emails from Karen sent weeks before, urging board members to pressure the Nash property into compliance through optics and legality. Mentions of isolating the structure, shaming refusal, and a line that read, "If we can't get him to sign, we make him uncomfortable enough that he'll beg to." By the end of that week, Lasky had enough. He secured a warrant and coordinated with the FBI office in Asheville. Then came the takedown. At 6:42 a.m. the following Tuesday, 3 unmarked government vehicles rolled into the Winding Creek HOA office parking lot. Agents and Navy windbreakers moved fast. Boxes of documents were carried out, computers bagged, phones confiscated. Karen was seen arguing with a tall agent until she was finally guided gently but firmly into a black sedan. Later that day, local news broke the story. FBI raids Winding Creek HOA office amid allegations of harassment, fraud, and forged documents. That evening, my gate stayed quiet. I sat on the porch with Nate, watching the sunset bleed across the Carolina Ridge. "You think they'll back off now?" I asked. Nate gave me a tired smile. "They're bleeding. But rats fight hardest when cornered. We didn't realize just how deep the rot went. Not yet. It took less than 48 hours for the case to explode. Karen Landry was arraigned in district court on multiple charges: conspiracy to defraud, misuse of private information, harassment under civil code, and falsification of legal documents. Her mugshot made the evening news with the caption, "HOA official behind campaign of harassment faces federal charges." I saved the article, not out of spite, just as proof that reality still works sometimes. Nate testified before a grand jury that Friday. Calm, direct, badge on his belt and all, he outlined every detail, from the day they loitered at my gate to the social media smear campaign and the forged architectural notices. His internal reports and the surveillance footage we'd gathered filled 2 thick binders. More homeowners began coming forward, people I hadn't even met. A retired teacher 3 lots over said Karen had threatened to file a lien unless she refaced her porch columns to match HOA standards. A young couple down the hill shared how they'd been invited to a private dinner where they were urged to sign community compliance documents. One man confessed he sold his house last year because he just couldn't take it anymore. The dominoes kept falling. The FBI's document review uncovered over 14 distinct instances where Karen and other board members forged compliance signatures, retroactively added properties to jurisdictional maps, and issued more than $200,000 in unapproved fines. One of the spreadsheets even had a column labeled Pressure Level 15. They literally ranked how much to squeeze people. The final blow came when the board's treasurer admitted under immunity that Karen had pushed for creating patrol teams to observe non-member homes. These weren't just neighborhood watches, they were intimidation squads. By the end of the month, the entire Winding Creek HOA board had either resigned or been indicted. Federal oversight was established for the community's governance, and the county opened a hotline for reporting HOA harassment. Nate said it was one of the fastest collapses he'd ever seen for a civilian organization under federal scrutiny. As for me, well, I got a certified letter of a very different sort. It was from the county office. An official apology for the failure to intervene earlier, accompanied by a compensation package for legal expenses, emotional distress, and property interference. Total amount awarded, $85,000. Nate whistled when he read it. Guess coffee's on you now. But the best moment came 2 weeks later. We were installing new motion lights on the front gate, just in case, when I noticed Nate screwing a small plaque into the post. I leaned in to read it. Private property. HOA trespassers will be recorded. Consult the FBI before knocking. Underneath, in Sharpie, Nate Bancroft. I laughed harder than I had in months. For the first time in a long time, the mountain air didn't carry that tight, coiled pressure. The gate was closed, the house was quiet, and not a single compliance form was anywhere in sight. Sometimes the system works. Sometimes it needs a friend with a badge.